In today's video, the sister and mother of missing person Brandon Williams tells us about Brandon's disappearance. In May of 2013, Brandon Williams took a Greyhound bus leaving Salt Lake City headed to Key West, Florida. But he never made it to Key West. Before we dive into the interview with Stormy and Dee Dee, make sure you give this video a like and a comment down below. The more interaction you show with this video, the more likely YouTube is to show it to other viewers, which helps us keep Brandon's story out in the public eye. Also, be sure you hit the subscribe button down below so you're notified next Saturday when we upload a video where we talk with Megan Good of Charlie Project.
Well, Brandon is the second child. I have two other older boys, so he fits in there. But he had the biggest, brownest eyes and the curliest little hair that you ever seen. Cutest little boy. He loved trucks. He loved guns. He loved to fish. He loved to hunt. He was very accident prone. He was running out a back door and he slammed the door on his pointer finger on one of his hands and took the tip of his finger off. And then when he was in elementary school, I believe in the 5th grade, he was sitting on top of the bleachers and his feet got stuck. And so he fell off the bleachers and busted his 2 front teeth out. And then he was attacked when he was 4 years old. He was viciously attacked by a pit bull that took his top lip half off, ripped his left ear all the way off, and bit into his skull to where it caused him to have seizures. He has had major plastic surgery. And after the dog attack, his personality changed because he got a lot of teasing. The kids was calling him fat lip and dog lip, and he just had a really hard time because of his scarring. And the older he got, the worse the teasing got, and he got involved in some drugs and some alcohol. And then he went through the AA program and got clean and sober. And that's really about it. This is Brandon and his brother. Brandon's the dark complected one, and my oldest boy Rick's the oldest one.
From my perspective, Hoss is what I always grew up calling Brandon, because I guess when he was a baby, he looked like Hoss from the Ponderosa,
chubby,
and so everyone just called him Hoss. So that's what I grew up calling him. He's 8 years older than me, so and he's the closest one to me in age. So I was basically his shadow. Our older brother is 2 years older than him, so my oldest brother is 10 years older than me. And so me and Haas were always a lot more close, and I would follow him. I was his shadow, and he loved to tease me a lot. And I just remember we would always do things together. We would go, one of my favorite memories is when he laid out a blanket and we just stared at the stars, and he just told me stories from his childhood, and then he was picking on me like a brother would. He always told me that it's in the brother's handbook to tease and torment their little sister, because if he didn't do that, he wasn't doing his job as an older brother. These are two of my favorite pictures. This was at one of his birthday parties, and it's just me and him. Always said, like, Haas was always the one that would go to the doctor's appointments and stuff with her when she was pregnant with me. So he was like one of the first ones to hear my heartbeat and all of that stuff. So he took his role of being an older brother serious. He teased me, but if anyone else teased me, they were in trouble because Big Brother would step in. But yeah, I really love watching the old home movies and stuff, and watching and getting glimpses of him in our childhood.
Take me back to when you first found out that Brandon disappeared.
Well, I was at home And I got a phone call from one of his buddies that said that he hadn't made it back. He had come to Utah and he was headed back to Florida Keys. And one of his friends called and told me that he never had made it. Now, Brandon, he would disappear for a month or so and go on his little wandering trips. But even though we may not see him, we always knew where he was at.
Yeah, and he always made contact with me. Like, when I was little, like, I remember one time he disappeared for, like, I don't know, 5 months or something, but we always knew, like, that he was okay because people would see him. But I remember coming home and he'd have gifts on the back door for me and stuff like that. So, like, even though he was a wanderer at heart, he always made contact, and he would leave our mom her birthday present on the back door and stuff. He just loved to wander. He had, like, the wandering spirit.
But when I got the phone call, it wasn't like the other times.
Well, who called to tell you that he had disappeared?
So it was my brother's best friend at the time. He got a phone call from my brother's current roommate / what we found out later, boyfriend, saying that, asking if he had heard from my brother because Foss had never arrived in Key West on his designated Monday. And so he waited until Friday thinking that my brother might have missed the bus and that he was on a different bus. So he waited a week until he contacted Spencer, and then Spencer then contacted my mom, who then contacted me.
But when I first got the news that he hadn't showed up, it felt like somebody had put their hand into my chest and just ripped my heart out, and it hurt. And as soon as I knew that, it took my breath away.
Mm-hmm.
I knew something was wrong. I knew that this was different than him just taking off and going on one of his spurts. And then from that point on, we never heard from him. And we're still looking for him 6 months later, or 6 years later.
You found out because Charles contacted Spencer, is that correct? And then Spencer contacted you. And it's important to note that there was a possible relationship between Charles and Brandon.
Yes.
Charles lived in Key West, where Brandon was residing.
Yeah.
Prior to what we'll get into in a minute, and Spencer was his best friend. Okay. Take me back to the day that in Key West where Brandon got pulled over and what happened from that.
So, like, we don't know exactly all of the details on that. We've tried to piece together the best that we can, all of the clues. But I just know that my brother was driving, from what I've come to understand, Charles's car, and he was pulled over, and I'm not sure exactly why the offense was, but when he was pulled over, they ran his name and found out that he had a warrant from Utah from 12 years prior. And so they arrested him, and then they contacted the state of Utah, who wanted him extradited back to the state. And the warrant was for paraphernalia from years prior. Yes, so he was jailed at Utah County Jail, and he was supposed to have, I believe, like a 4-month sentence, but they ended up releasing him in May. So he got arrested in February, and he was released in May. And then one of his friends picked him up from the county jail, and then he made contact with his brother, because they have a different dad than me, and so their brother from their dad's side picked him up, and a couple days later from his friend's house, and took him to the train station, and which was the bus depot as well. Mm-hmm. And that was the last that anybody ever saw of him.
He served his time, was released early. A friend picked him up. He stayed there for a while, and then he decided to take a Greyhound bus back to Key West from Salt Lake City.
And from what we heard, because my brother didn't have any money or anything like that, the ticket was purchased for him, and all of his belongings were back with Charles in Key West, Florida. So I'm still not quite sure how he got on the bus without an identification. That was never really made clear to us. They extradited him straight from the jailhouse. So they had released, from what I understand, all of his belongings to Charles. Charles had his phone, his social security card, his license, everything is what Charles had told us.
So he gets on the bus in Salt Lake City. What day was that?
He got out, I believe, on the 14th. We have him down as disappeared on the 16th of May.
So May 16th, 2013.
And we know that he contacted anyone, and that was in Nashville. He left like the 15th from here because he stayed the night on the 14th that I know of. Mm-hmm. So it was just a short time as soon as he got out of jail that he was here, because he wanted out of Utah, because Utah was just not a good place for him. He always got more into trouble here. It's easier to get in trouble, I guess, because, you know, your old friends are getting in trouble too. So he just knew that he had to get back home where he had his fresh start. And nobody knew him as 20-year-old Hoss, who was the partier, you know, like the druggie and stuff like that. I don't know.
So he got on the bus in Salt Lake City, and the last known location was Nashville. And tell us how you know that Nashville was the last known location.
He contacted Charles when he was in Nashville, and Charles sent him money, and Charles never really got back to me that if it was like picked up or not. I think he said it was. But Charles gave me the phone number that my brother supposedly called him from. And from like just a lot of our searching and stuff, that phone number was associated to a law office that wasn't functioning at that time. And we can't really find anywhere that number existed in 2013, but where the number exists now as a scammer phone number. But so we don't really know exactly what phone number he called from, but we do know that he had used some of his tickets from what the first officer told us, that he did make it to Nashville at least. Okay.
And the officer said, so the officer verified that he didn't use any other tickets from Nashville to Key West.
And that's what his notes say, because I was able to obtain his notes.
Okay. Tell me about some of the challenges that you've had to face going through this process of filing your missing persons report and trying to obtain information.
Well, when we first found out that he'd come up missing, I called and I I first called Atlanta, Georgia, because that's where we thought that the last time we rode on the bus was to Atlanta, Georgia. So I spent a lot of time with Atlanta, Georgia, checking their morgue for, you know, new identified remains and stuff like that. And then they suggested, where he was from Florida Keys, to sign a missing persons in Florida Keys. So I called up to Florida Keys. They said they couldn't take a report, that it should be here in where we live. So we filed one here, and they said that they didn't want to take it because he didn't disappear here, that we'd have him down in Nashville and Atlanta, Georgia area. So we were dealing with 4 different states, and we lost 2.5 valuable years looking for him in Atlanta, Georgia, when the last place that can actually be verified where he stopped at the Western Union to pick up his money but it's been a nightmare. We were told that he's an adult, and when he wants to be found, he'll be found. Nobody took us seriously that he was missing, and I'm just speechless. I mean, we've had nothing but rumbling around in the darkness, and we've learned trial by error. It's been a horrible thing, and we still don't have all of our facts straight. Yeah. The detective here in Ephraim that took over our case, we took in pictures of his tattoos and everything, and when our detective in Nashville got the case, he just had a piece of paper with a few things written on it. He didn't have any of the pictures of his tattoos or anything. And so we actually don't have any clues to go on. We know nothing.
Well, tell me, what made you first check the Atlanta, Georgia area?
Oh, like at first, like we really didn't start focusing on Atlanta, I don't feel like, until the officer here, because we went and we filed with Ephraim. And we told him like the last known whereabouts. I had a whole sheet of paper, front and back, of everything that I had gathered in just the couple of days that I was trying to piece together what exactly happened. I was talking to his friend that picked him up and let him sleep on her couch. She told me exactly what he was wearing, which was khaki pants and an orange shirt, because he had no clothes because he had been extradited in a gelled jumpsuit. So they had given him a pair of khaki pants and an orange shirt and just some just simple like slip-on shoes. And then I got a hold of his brother, and his brother told me about him coming over and seeing them for a minute and stuff, and him dropping him off. And then Spencer told me that he had talked to my brother in St. Louis. So I had that note. And then Charles told me that he talked to my brother in Nashville. So we focused on Nashville at first. We did for a while, but then the officer that we had filed the report here in Ephraim found my mom and told her that he had found out that my brother had made it to Atlanta, Georgia. And that was the last ticket that was used, was Atlanta, Georgia. And so we focused after that. And that was maybe like a month into like his disappearance. We focused on Atlanta, Georgia at that point. And, but then the officer just didn't want to do anything else. Like he was like, there's nothing we can do. Like he's an adult. He'll be found when he wants to be found. And so we kind of just took over the investigation on our own because they didn't want to really do anything for us since he was an adult and because of his past. And so I was combing through the NamUs database of unidentified individuals, and I came across a John Doe. And the John Doe had some scarring on his upper lip that was very similar to my brother's. And so I contacted the caseworker. And at this point, we were on NamUs. It took us 3 months to get on NamUs because the officer here didn't want to send them in the paperwork, stuff like that. Finally got him to do it. My mom had to basically chase him down, like call dispatch and find out where he was and go and ask him, please, can you just do this for us? And so when I found this John Doe, I contacted the caseworker, and so she sent a DNA kit here to our local police station, and he took our DNA samples because we didn't have a DNA sample of my brother, so they did a family familiar. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to say it, but like where they base your his DNA off of our DNA and so they collected both of our DNA, and then from there she ended up contacting me and saying, from going through all of the notes that I have that the officer sent NamUs, she said, I believe that we need to focus on Nashville because that is the only place that the last place that we really can verify based off of him having a phone conversation and getting money from a Western Union. We need to go back to that. So she actually took on our case. She took over our NamUs case. And then from there, she was like, I have a colleague of mine in Nashville, and I'm going to contact him and see if he will take over Brandon's case. And so at this point, we're about 2.5 years out since my brother disappeared. And then, so our new detective took over our case. He sent out press releases, everything, and he said he didn't get any bites, like no leads, nothing. But at that point, it had been 2.5 years, and he was just shocked at like the lack of information my brother's case had when he took over the case. And he was shocked that they hadn't contacted Nashville since my brother last known place was Nashville, that our police department didn't even contact them and saying, hey, we have a missing person from here that was last known in your city. Like, there was no collaboration between police forces. And so he was frustrated with that.
Okay. It sounds like the woman that you spoke with that suggested, the Nashville area taking over the case did a really good thing for you guys and helped put you back on track. Can you tell me what impact her doing that made for you guys?
It helped our case get moving along. It gave us hope because we didn't have anything to go on.
Yeah, and from this, like, we've actually like developed a friendship with her, and she prays for my brother and for our family, and if we find any sort of leads, we let her. She's one of the first people that we contact to let her know like what's going on with our case.
My girlfriend that lives in Louisiana sent me a clipping on Facebook the other day, and she says, I just thought you and Stormy might want to check into this, but some hunters had found some remains down in Nashville. And so I called and told Stormy, and then Stormy, didn't you call her?
No, I messaged her, but she said that whenever
she messaged her, and then Detective Jolly's aware of it, and so we're just kind of waiting to see if it was him. And then this other group took over our case pro bono as ex-FBI agents, detectives, and cops, and la-di-da. And they were supposed to have been done the last August, but we haven't heard anything, and they're just wrapping up the case, so we should be hearing something on what they found out.
Yeah. Amy totally like shined a light into it all, because at this point we really didn't have an advocate on our side. We didn't have anybody that listened to us or cared about what we were feeling. And she didn't care about my brother's past or anything. Her heart is for the families and the victims, because missing people are victims, in some sense, like whether or not they've had to go into hiding for something or, they've been murdered. But yeah, she's totally helped us out. And she explained to us that whenever they find a John Doe, that our DNA and my brother's dental records and everything are in CODIS. And so whenever a John Doe is added to the database, it automatically runs his information against John Doe's.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you guys found some bit of light in this process. And I hope that you're able to get this resolved as soon as possible. But I want to ask you, during your process and becoming so familiar with the missing person process and all of the different websites that house information and how law enforcement works, are there any laws or policies that you would like to see changed in the realm of missing persons?
I'd like to see the police departments work closer together. Like I said, that the Detective Jolly in Nashville wasn't getting anything a phone call from here to know that there was even a missing person out there. I'd like to see them work closer together. I really wish that they wouldn't be so quick to judge. And if somebody comes up missing, make it a priority and look for them instead of just clapping their hands and saying, you know, they're of an age. If it's a child, everybody's involved. But when it's an adult, nobody cares to look. And that's what I'd like to see changed.
Yeah, like I agree. Like I feel like there needs to be more unity among the law enforcement agencies when it comes to missing individuals. I feel like a lot of times, you know, like it's more like this is our law, this is our department, this is, you know, our case, instead of being like, hey, like we are states apart, we have no way of really checking this out. Would you be willing to, you know, look at this case with us?
I'd like to also see something, and I don't even know if this would even be feasible, but some kind of an alert, like Amber Alert, for people that come up missing. Is, you know, if they're endangered, then let's get some kind of alert out. Like just recently, we had an elderly gentleman in Salt Lake City that disappeared. Well, you know, if we'd put an Amber Alert out, would have been able to find him, and he had Alzheimer's, but they found him dead because they just, adults just aren't looked for the way the children are. And it really makes me mad because even though they're not a child, they're somebody's child and they're a human and they should have the right to be looked for. You know, I've reserved to myself that I believe my son is dead. I just hope and pray that I get some kind of answers that I don't have to go through the rest of my life not knowing what's happened to my boy. Because the longer it goes, the more my head, I play all these horrible scenarios in my head on what could have happened to him. And then it just, I don't even know what to say. It's just too hard.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that with us, Dee Dee. I think it's important for people to hear this, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and for people to see the real raw emotion behind these cases, that it's not only the face of a missing person, but it's also, you know, the backstory, you know, what's being done to help address this issue. You know, how long has it been since they've been missing, and what's being done currently? You know, is the case still being worked on? People don't see that. They don't see how it impacts the family. So I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about that.
And I know that my heart just breaks for all those parents out there, grandparents, or people that have loved ones that are missing, because I can honestly say I know how they feel, and it's a horrible place to be. Horrible place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you could give any advice to a family member that is just experiencing this nightmare, they just recently had someone go missing, what advice would you give to them?
I would say, like, don't give up. Even if, like, the police agency is saying, you shouldn't be filing this, they're an adult. Like, to go with your gut, to go with your natural instincts, because you know that person better than the police officer does. And I would say, like, don't leave any stone unturned. At the beginning, I spent countless hours on the internet contacting so many different people from my brother's Facebook page that had last conversations that I knew had communicated with him, and contacting them and finding details that I was able to pass on to our detective once he took over a case. And just really don't give up. Hold on to the hope, because I feel like that's what really gets me through. And keep fighting until you can find an advocate. that that really takes your case seriously and takes your loved one seriously, because they are out there, and our caseworker is one of those many people, and this is what she does for a living because she's very passionate about it, and she wants there to be change, and she wants there to be community between law enforcement and the different databases. She wants it to be where it's easy for people to find their missing loved ones. And so I would just say there's people out there that understand what you're going through, and not to feel alone, because you're not, and to reach out and find other people that have missing loved ones. That's what got me through too, was I found on Facebook some groups that had missing brothers and pages, and I messaged them, and they wrote me back, and they expressed their sorrow that I was enduring what they had been enduring, and then they gave me feedback and stuff, and they're like, sometimes you just have to shake off what people say to you on your Facebook pages, because she's like, they're cold-hearted sometimes, and she said you just can't take that seriously because they don't know your brother the way that you do. And so I would just say, really just stick with your instincts and keep fighting, because you're their voice.
I think I'd pretty much sum it up the same as Stormy, you know, to go with your instinct and not to be idle. I mean, sometimes, like Stormy and I, we've had to do most of the police work ourselves, and we're amateurs and we don't know what we're doing, but we're trying to find my son. But be an advocate for yourself. Follow up signs or that you feel, you know, if you, like with Hutz, if I had my way, I would really investigate his roommate, Charles, because in my heart, I still believe that man knows something more than what he's saying. And I would go to him personally, but I would say go with your gut and follow the leads that you can and get the information to the police officer. And like Stormy, not to give up, but if they were just to miss a child, my heart breaks for them, because they're in a very cruel cycle that sometimes you can't find the door to get out of. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the love of your family and your faith in God that's going to be able to pull you through. And never, never, never underestimate prayer. You know, just when we think that it's so dark that we can't, that sometimes I've even thought that God has turned his back and given up on us, and then he'll give us a little nugget of something, like this remains being found in Nashville. That's, to me, a sign going, I'm still with you. Here it is. So that lives my hope again, that maybe there's hope we'll find him. But in my heart, I don't think I'm ever going to find what happens to my son. And it breaks my heart worse than ever. It's the worst pain that you can even imagine. I could handle him. I could handle him dying of cancer or having a funeral for him. But it's the not knowing.
Stormy, can you tell us where people can keep up with Brandon's case and where they should report information if they have any tips?
Okay, so you can find us on Facebook if you just type in Find Brandon. But it's facebook.com/Find Brandon, or if you just type in the search engine Find Brandon Williams, it will pop it up. And then we also have a website called www.findbrandonwilliams.weebly.com. And if you have a tip on where my brother is or know what happened to him, I encourage you to call the Nashville Metro Police Station and ask for Detective Jolly. He is the one that is in charge of my brother's case, and he would be more than willing to talk to you on any leads that you have in regards to my brother, because he's at a loss.
Because somebody out there knows something.
That's right. Somebody out there knows where Brandon is. And if they do, we are asking that they come forward and just give the information so that this family can have a little bit of peace, but that Brandon can also be recognized as a human being, and wherever he may be, that his family is aware of what happened to him and whether or not he's okay. So I really appreciate it. Again, I know this is not easy to talk about, but I really appreciate you guys doing this.
Oh, and like I told you before, you're an answer to prayer. It's one of our little nuggets that the Lord's given us as you. So thank you.